Good morning. So I wanted to comment on what I wrote about grace and beauty being dignity and pride. Grace, it's interesting because Esther, the righteous woman from the story of Purim, she is described as being an olive complexion, which at the time was not considered something beautiful. The beautiful skin color, if anything, would be Sarah, who was white, at least in comparison to where she was going to Mitzrayim. And it mentions that in Rashi there, that her beauty was they'd never seen a beautiful woman before. So she had to be concealed at customs when they were crossing the border. And when they discovered her, of course, they took her and they kidnapped her and brought her, well, not necessarily kidnapped, because Avram didn't oppose it, her husband. He trusted in Sarah's strength. She was incredibly powerful. She could take on the leader of the superpower of the world and have no worries about him and all his cohorts. Good morning, Akusinachi. Sarah didn't have to worry about Parai, and Avraham knew that. So he didn't have to worry so much about her being in his palace, etc. And I mean, even though he had the whole nation at his disposal, Parai, to do what he wanted, but Sarah was more powerful than that, and she had a malach protecting her. There's some people here that are pulling up beside me. They probably don't know what I'm doing. I'm gonna find a new location, or maybe just drive around a little bit. So, I was saying that Esther was called olive complexion, and then I got sidetracked by the idea of what is considered a beautiful complexion. That's how I got speaking about Sarah, who was more powerful than Avram, her husband, in many respects. But Esther was green. Esther was, what's the word in the Gemara? Yerakranis? She was olive complexion, and that was not beautiful, but she had grace. She found grace in the eyes of the king, so she wins the beauty pageant. So grace is something that is beautiful because it's the way you respond to something. If someone who is given the unattractive olive complexion, okay, some people think it's very beautiful, but that's not really the point. And beauty is transient and superficial anyways, and that's why in Purim we celebrate with costumes and masks to laugh at that aspect, that very prominent aspect of our world. We laugh at that. So Esther was green. Esther was not beautiful, not like the other heroines of Tanakh who are beautiful, and it goes on to describe their beauty, sometimes at great length. I think by Rachel, beauty is obviously something that's relevant to the Torah, to even enough to mention and discuss it. So, but Esther had something even greater than that. She had grace. She had the ability to take characteristics that might not have been valued or extolled as being beautiful or aesthetic, and she was to cast it in such a light by reacting to that, by reacting to what we're given. If we're given, okay, I'm going to confess, I walked into a massive puddle this morning. It was flooding in the mikvah that I was going to Taiva Keli, which means I was going to immerse my vessels into a ritual bath to make them pure to be used. And there was a flood in front of it, like half a foot of water, and I went in it. So, and I came up with this phrase prior to that. So I had to reflect on what is the meaning of this idea of grace. Excuse me for 1 second. Just gonna have a sip of water. I had to ask myself, why did I fall into the water this morning? That's really weird. I thought maybe that meant I had to go home to change my shoes to help out at home because the kids sometimes can be a challenge. But that wasn't the case. I went home and they were good, uniquely. So I had to ask myself. So I thought, and since I had just came up with this line before that, I felt that the two maybe they were related, since it didn't seem that it happened to me, so I had to rush home. So I'd figured maybe the idea of grace has to do with how we respond to a situation. So is it graceful to step into a puddle? No. Is it beautiful to step in a puddle? That for sure not. It's not a beautiful thing. It makes you feel really awkward, and what are you going to do about it? So obviously you got to go home and change your shoes and socks. But how, are we going to squeak and squeal and be upset and I'm wasting my morning? And how do you respond to an unusual challenge in your day? How do you react to that? That is grace, because when one is born into certain features, if Esther was not the most beautiful woman in the world, she has to react to that deficiency, because beauty is something that's inherent to creation. If God is the creator and he creates the world, and God is beautiful because he's perfection, he's reality, the truth of the world, then the creation itself has to reflect that. If not now, which in many respects it already does, but if not now, then for sure when the world comes to its perfection in Yemais Mashiach, the Messianic era, and ultimately a higher world, which is probably going to be 40 years after that, as it says in the Zayar. But then you're going to have Olam HaTechiyah, the world of the resurrection of the dead, a world of revealed revelations and miracles and godliness. That's not something that we can really imagine. Interestingly, and to go off topic, but related to this, the idea of Yemais Mashiach, the days of Mashiach, it says in Rambam that he brings the Chazal, with our sages, what they say, that there doesn't have to be any difference between this world and the Messianic era, except the fact that the Jewish nation will not be subservient to the other nations of the world. It could be that we just have dominion of the world through the greatness of the king, which is going to be Mashiach. So that is at the bare minimum of what Mashiach is going to introduce to the world. It means that we will no longer be the punching bag and the victim of the world, as you saw this morning that we were, but we will be, the fear of the entire world will be evoked from us. They will be respectful of Jews for a change, and they will actually be subservient in the sense that we will be the dominant kingdom of the world, if not the only kingdom of the world. So obviously then we're not going to take mistaken missiles being flung into our neighborhoods at that time. We won't be cowardly and so worried. I think, nobody asks for self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice is something you couldn't ask for unless you're Rabbi Akiva, but self-sacrifice is said to be the ultimate merit. But if you think about it, even if you don't see any spiritual value in it, it's the most worthwhile thing that you could do. How many people reflect on the Holocaust and say, if only the Jewish people fought and stood up for themselves, the tragedy would have been much less, and we would have had our pride, and we would have had our dignity. And I think, therefore, since it is such an claim of dignity and pride to die fighting, okay, there's dignity in being a sheep to slaughter, I suppose. If we do it marching off to, I don't think that's ultimately what God wants. God wants a Jew to stand up for himself, I think. And therefore, I think that it's a tremendous merit how many Jewish heroes have there been throughout history? We have a very long history, not 40 years, 70 years. We go back thousands of years. We're the only nation that's risen from antiquity and are still here to speak about with our original culture, intact. And not only intact, but more available than ever before in history. So actually, to just develop this tangent a little bit more, I heard a story that someone went to the Rebbe, I think it was for a private audience called Yechidus, and this person was not a Lubavitcher Chassid, And just trying to remember the story, it's slipping my mind for a second. Oh yeah, I'm remembering it now. So he came by the Rebbe to ask. He met with the Rebbe, but he had concerns about his faith in God, and he was losing his observance. His level of observance was slipping, and he's thinking about this, and the Rebbe basically read his mind and told him that he just introduced the topic without the person asking, but this person had the question of I think I'm going to stop there, because this story, I'm going to be able to tell it, but it's not going to be delivered in a way that's worthwhile at this point. So you could have left this video a few minutes ago and you would have missed nothing. So we'll hopefully continue, maybe in a class in the Zal. Maybe I'll continue the shiurim that I'd like to start. I did one already about Kuntres Aveda. And that's all about the Jewish approach and the Hasidic approach to tefillah, prayer, davening. Anyways, have a great day, everyone.